Firstly, I wanted to say that I don't think Amira even knows this, but when I first set out to do these live Q&As with authors, I actually saw you pop up in my LinkedIn feed. I think a mutual friend liked something you'd posted, and I was like, Amira would be a dream person. And that just felt like such a long shot that that was never going to happen. But then fortunately, fate allowed us to be here today. And I'm so grateful that Amira commented on one of my LinkedIn posts saying that she was open to having this conversation. We had an initial conversation a couple of months ago, and I absolutely loved getting to know you, getting to know your whole life story, not only in regards to this book, but also your upbringing and the story that we will get into a little bit today, and then also the content of your book, your journey with your book, and just the incredible things that you do across your life professionally in your writing, and also um, with your family. And I'm so inspired by that. So thank you for being here. Thank you so much for trusting me in this conversation. And thank you, everyone else, for joining. So let me introduce Amira to those who don't know her yet. Amira is an award-winning Executive Vice President of Comms, Change Management, and DEI Advisory at Edelman. She's also the author of upcoming book, The Price of Nice, Why Comfort Keeps Us Stuck, and 4 Actions for Real Change. It's coming out on October 28th this year and being published by Penguin. She brings 18 years of expertise in healthcare comms, reputation management, DEI, and social impact. She was named 2024's Woman of the Year by Women Healthcare Executives. And she also teaches, she does so much. She also teaches change management and marketing at CSU, East Bay, and UCSF. And Amira lives in Benicia, California. If you haven't been to Benicia, it is just the most magical little like seaside town vibe town in the Bay Area. I highly recommend visiting if you haven't visited yet. And her family's on a mission to visit all 417 US national parks. How many have you been to so far?
Maybe like 22.
Okay. All
We're
right.
trying really hard. Our daughter Audrey is 12, and we've got a little bit of time before she's 18 and leaves the house, but we've hit almost all of the California ones. So we've definitely got that down. We've got to make our way out east.
That's awesome. Well, I can't wait to follow your travels there, and who knows, maybe that will be a future book.
Love it. Yes, I hope so. Actually, I think that would be such an interesting series of stories and sort of, whatchamacallit moments for people in some genre. Who knows?
I'm sure, I'm sure. I'm gonna add into the chat a link where you can buy Amira's book or pre-order Amira's book and be one of the first to get it. And I just want to say, when I follow a lot of authors online, and when I see that a book has launched, my favorite thing to see is that their friends and supporters and people who pre-ordered are the first to share their reviews and post pictures. And honestly, it makes such a difference as an author and also as someone who's considering a book. So once you get that copy, if you get that pre-ordered copy, please post a picture of it. It doesn't have to be an extensive review, but honestly, every little bit we can do to support authors is so valued and appreciated. And it just helps support the silent work that we have to do for years before actually getting it out there. So Kim, thanks for already ordering it. If you haven't already ordered it, the link is in the chat. And I am going to get started. So let's start with the big idea of your book. Can you share with everyone what is the big idea and what led to it?
Yes. The price of nice is about how we confuse being nice with being good, being successful, and especially at work. I think in every facet of life, but especially in the workplace. And niceness often just means avoiding conflict, staying quiet, keeping things and people comfortable, particularly those who might already have some kind of power or privilege. And one of the ways I describe it, it's like painting over mold. Right? You make it look fine, but the problem is still there underneath. You still have a problem with mold. That's not going to help anybody. And I wrote this book to name that dynamic and to help people break free from this harmful, I believe, and insidious social construct. Just this made up rule that in order to get ahead, in order to be seen and valued and to belong, that you have to prioritize being nice versus something else and the antithesis of nice, which many people will think of as mean. I don't, and we're going to get into that. I talk about it as something other than mean, and that is the core concept that niceness is actually holding us back from change, from progress, from being more than we could be, and from a world that we could all live in where we can thrive.
I love this so much, and it's definitely how I aim to live my life, how I do live my life. But I have found that one of the things I've struggled with is that I think in a professional context, especially, people hire people that they like. They don't necessarily, in my experience, and I hope I'm wrong, but they don't necessarily hire people who they think are the best at the job or the most discerning or thoughtful. And so sometimes I worry that by not focusing on niceness, by focusing on this alternative that we are going to get to, bit of foreshadowing there, that I'm not going to be invited into the room, not because I'm not skilled, but because I'm not palatable to be around or the most comfortable person to be around. So, how do you manage that?
You're not wrong. People do hire people who they're like, right? Our minds are wired to value sameness and others that are like us, and it is a bias. And the only way to mitigate a bias is to name it and to know that it exists so that you can change your behavior and how you deal with that. And not that it's wrong to want to like the people you work alongside. We spend so much time in the workplace. But you do want to also think about what does this person bring to the table, and a homogenous room isn't the most helpful. You know, I don't need everyone to be like me or to think like me. In fact, I need the opposite of that in the workplace in order for us to progress and to think differently or to think outside of the box. And I'm pausing because now I said all that. I'm forgetting what your main question was there. Ask it again.
Is how do you balance not just being nice for the sake of being nice while recognizing that being nice leads to being likable, and people seem, what I've found in corporate roles, to prioritize likability over effectiveness.
Yeah. So it is a dance. That's how I think of it. Um, Nice says don't make waves. Nerve says the wave needs to come no matter the outcome. And the way I navigate it is I ask myself, what is the cost of staying silent in this moment, right? Who benefits if I sugarcoat this truth? And sometimes I soften my tone, right? But maybe not always my truth. And I was actually just talking to a junior staff member at my day job yesterday, and she asked me this question, and I likened it to a dial. I said, sometimes I practice the antithesis of nice, which is nerve, not meanness. Sometimes I practice nerve at a 2 on the dial. Sometimes I practice nerve at a 10 on the dial. It depends on the room, the topic at hand. How serious is this? Do I really need to dive in here and come in swinging, or can I let it go? Who is the person across the table from me? And one of the things I was saying to this junior staff member was that I look for signals in people and their behaviors that help me understand that, okay, maybe this person is more apt to receive nerve at a 10 on the dial than a 2 on the dial. And there are signals, in terms of how people show up, the kind of leader they are, the language that they use, the way they make decisions that will help you with that calculus of how far am I going to turn up the dial on practicing nerve today? And it's not that there's something wrong with nice, right? Sometimes nice is the answer. And what I want to unpack in this book is that the opposite of nice doesn't equate to discomfort. And that's what I want people to realize. Practicing truth telling or showing up with nerve doesn't mean you're not being nice. In fact, it might be the nicest thing you are doing, or kindest, I think is the way some people describe it, to tell the truth, to say the quiet parts out loud, to not sugarcoat, and to do what needs doing to make sure we can all move forward. That may very well be the nicest thing. And some people are more equipped to see that, to understand it, and to receive it of, wow, this person did what was effective. They did what was necessary for the change to come so that we could all be better in this team meeting, in this workplace, or on this project. And so discomfort isn't disrespect. Nerve is not nice, right? It might actually be the most nice thing to practice nerve.
This is making me think that, God forbid, if I ever get another corporate job, I think that actually prioritizing leadership, who, if I have that dial in my mind, really prioritizing leadership, who I believe through the interview process, through meeting them, has the capacity or actually values a higher number on that
Yeah.
dial, might actually be a better environment for me to be in. And also, as you're talking, I'm curious if you've found this or if it's been a sort of a thing that's been in your mind as you've looked for jobs over the years. I feel like we're told that we should show up to work in our full authenticity and as our full selves. We know that that's a little bit impractical in reality, but I'm wondering if you were to find leadership or managers who have more capacity to hold nerve, then you
Mhm.
are more likely to show up authentically, and then you are actually more likely to enjoy your job and be better at it and grow in the company. Is that something you found or thought about?
And the way I talk about it, I authentic self to me, I don't even like to say that. I try to say chosen self, particularly when it comes to the workplace, because I don't, especially, depending on the layers of your identity, me as a Black, disabled, and woman in America, like, I don't think there's a workplace where I can be authentically me. That doesn't exist. I think that there are workplaces where I can be more my chosen self,
Mm.
depending on the leader and the room. And so, yes, I always have sort of that calculus in mind that there are certainly leaders who are going to be better about me showing up as my chosen self, and I look for that. But authentic self, I don't know that there's space where many of us, again, depending on your layers of identity, can practice that fully because of the systems that exist around us in the US, and other systems that you can't see, like capitalism and racism and every phobia and ism that you can name. Authentic self, I don't know that that is achievable in the world we currently live in, versus chosen self, which I think is also safer. It's not always safe for me to be my authentic self. There are moments where being my authentic self, I would definitely get walked to the door. But my chosen self, or a different iteration of myself, that's something I can safely practice in the workplace, in a meeting, depending on, the particular scenario or person who's sitting across from me.
I really love that distinction, and it's not something I've thought of before because I think that when we're not being our full authentic self, it can be at a detriment to our health and our identity if we're doing it
Absolutely.
unconsciously. And so I love the idea of it being conscious. Hey, you know what? When you walk into that office or when you're in that meeting or when you're meeting with that person, it might not even be in a work context. This is my chosen self that I'm going to bring to that conversation, and it's intentional, and I recognize that it's not my fullest self, but that's okay, and I'm not abandoning myself to do it. It's intentional,
Right.
conscious. Yeah, I
Yeah.
love that.
Intention is the key.
I am going to take a little bit of a step back because I'm loving this rabbit hole that we're going down. It could be another hour-long conversation. But I want to take a step back and hear a little bit about your life path and your journey and your personal upbringing and how it led you to this insight and this perspective.
Yeah. Okay, where to start? I like to go back to the very beginning. So I am one of 8 children. I'm the second oldest, but the oldest girl, which I tell people what that means is I'm the boss and the family manager, because that's what is true when you are the oldest daughter often of a large family. So no matter what anyone else in my family tells you, I'm the family manager. I'm in charge. That's how that works. And my parents were actually missionaries. So I had a very distinct upbringing that I don't think a lot of people could say was true. So I grew up on a tiny, tiny island in the middle of the ocean, the island of Guam. It is a U.S. territory, and it is 30 miles long and 8 miles wide. So it is very much like a small town. If you grew up in a small town, you know a lot about what my upbringing was like. Everybody knows everybody. A lot of people are related to each other, and everyone's in everyone's business. And I was raised, in a very small place, in a very conservative and Christian evangelical family, to be agreeable, to be silent, to be respectful, to be obedient, to be quote unquote nice. And not all of the ways I was socialized or brought up were harmful, but in some ways, the priority of niceness over anything else was, I think, a very harmful thing that was posited to me. And I watched what that cost, that prioritization of nice always, nice first. I watched what that cost other women in particular and other people, but my mother, my sisters, aunts, friends, women in the faith group I grew up in, and just women in my life, right? And what it cost them were their boundaries, oftentimes their voice, in many instances, their dreams. And that tension stayed with me. And later in life, as a Black woman now in corporate America, I continue to see that, is in a different form, but, the cost of boundaries and voices and dreams were still very present. And I realized, we're training people to smile through injustice, to smile through the status quo, to smile through the lack of change and progress that so many of us require and need in a workplace, in a place of worship, in a country that wasn't built with all of us in mind. And that's the real price that too many of us have to pay, and why I wrote a whole book about it, because I couldn't stop thinking about it.
This segues really nicely to Lavida's question, which was, how did you decide that this was worthy of a book and not just an article or a podcast? And how did you really settle on that as the medium by which you were going to communicate this message?
When an idea won't leave you alone, when it keeps poking you in the side like a thorn in the side, and it keeps showing up in your life as a theme or in the lives of those around you. For me, it showed up in my life, my clients' stories, my own questions, my friends and family. To me, that's a book. I tried and I did. I wrote op-eds and I did little videos and reels and live conferences about this topic, and have for the entirety of my career. We were talking about this earlier, I recently started doing TikTok videos, which I swore I would never do. I posted my first video in March of this year. I promised myself I don't need another social media platform. I'm not going to sign up. And then I did. But it still didn't feel done, meaning that, I had written op-eds, but a book gives you the real estate, the room to breathe through and to build an idea and something that sticks, right? 700 words in an op-ed or an article is just sort of a snack, or a 30-second reel. It's just enough to sort of whet the palate and intrigue people, but to really unpack an idea and do what I'm trying to do, which is to help people to unlearn something that I think is harming them and then relearn something new. You need the real estate of a book to really walk through all of the nuances. And even then, it's not enough. 200 pages this book will be, and even that's not enough. And I had to cut words. I could have gone for like 700 pages, but maybe there will be a book number two.
What's something that didn't end up in the book that you're like, oh, this is an extra little tidbit?
So many stories. I fancy myself a storyteller. I grew up on a tiny island, and if you know a lot about island culture, especially the Hawaiians, we stole this from them. They would say, "Talk story. Let's talk story." And so I grew up talking story. And my husband, his family is from the deep South, and if you know anyone who is Southern, like, they live their life in stories. They're never just telling you about their favorite biscuit recipe. There's a whole story and a whole like family history that you are going to get. And so I've always been around storytellers, and there's so many stories from the workplace of both my experience or things that were told to me that I just couldn't keep in, or I couldn't keep all the details. So you're going to get a lot of stories in this book of real world things that you're going to be like, I've experienced that, I felt that. And there were so many details and nuances to the stories that I had to cut out. And so, I hope people will ask the questions because I'd love to, tell them additional details about all the fun, tea I spill in these stories and things that I experienced in the workplace, or that others, allowed me to share about their experiences in the workplace.
I love to hear that because I think oftentimes nonfiction books can fall into the trap of just being lists and how-tos. And the way we learn anything, even if it is
Mhm.
business related, is through story. It sticks with us forever. So
Right.
I I hope that, well, I'm excited to read it and get a glimpse of the high level story. And then I'm very grateful that hopefully I'll be able to follow up and ask for
You
more
will. You
juicy
know where to find
details.
me.
Yeah. You said that as you were writing it, your kind of concept around this dichotomy between nice and nerve evolved. Can you give a little bit more insight into what that evolution looked like, and maybe also how you've juggled personally this dichotomy in your life?
Mm. I think one of the things that shifted as I wrote the book is I didn't always call it nerve. And I think as you're going through the exercise of writing a book and you're trying to give to people a framework that they can emulate, I was trying to give to people what I've learned through, a 20-year career and just almost 40 years, which is weird to say, of life on this earth now, trying to give them some tools to do what I have done, of all that rooting out of patterns and unpacking and unlearning things and then relearning something new. And so things like, the word nerve that came up through the process of, that is actually what I mean. I mean nerve, yes. As opposed to like bravery or just other words that I had played with to sort of come up with this sort of like nice versus what. Like, what is the opposite? If it's not mean, what do I call that thing? And, it had come up, just over a series of my life of people saying things like, I can't believe you had the nerve to say that, or I can't believe you had the nerve to tell that executive that thing that nobody else wanted to say, or ask that question in the town hall. And, it's just that recollection of, yeah, it is nerve. Like, yes, actually, that is what the opposite is. I'm not being mean. It's just the nerve to say the truth and to ask the question and to give people pause enough for them to ask a different question or a bigger question. The other thing I would say that evolved is at first, I was writing a book about the workplace. When you're writing a book, you have to pick a category, right? So this is technically a business book. And but it became so clear that this is also a book about just societal and cultural nuances and power, about who gets to be heard, who pays the price when we prioritize comfort with our own or others over truth telling or honesty or discomfort. And it grew from a workplace book into something that I know will be much deeper and more personal and has applications for people who want to be something other than nice in any facet of life, your place of worship, your community, your family at the dinner table. These tools are things that any human can use and benefit from, not just someone in the workplace.
I think sometimes people look at people who do things with nerve and just imagine that for them it's easy and they don't feel anxious or stressed about it. And is that true when because I can think about my own experience, but when you ask those questions in the town hall, or when you bring the difficult comment to the family dinner table or whatever it is, do you have like an activated somatic experience, or does it feel easeful and just like talking about the weather to you?
It becomes more like second nature over time. I tell people it's like a muscle, right? And in order for your muscles to not atrophy, you have to eat, you have to hydrate, you have to go to the gym and get up and move. and do all the things. The same with nerve. I am certainly more audacious in the way that I show up and practice nerve, but that's a lifetime of unlearning, the niceness and of having these tools. And also, what is true and necessary to say, of building credibility and building relationships. Right. There are people who I have a relationship with or they believe I have some level of credibility, whether it's because of my job title or my education or what have you, or because I wrote a book, who I can practice nerve with differently than someone who's never heard of me. Right. Sometimes that's why you get a book deal, because, you're Googleable and people are like, oh, okay, this person has some credibility. Like they know what they're talking about. And so, yes, that's something that I, navigate, and it's never easy. It is easier each and every time I practice nerve, because now I have worked that muscle, and also I have more tools in my toolkit for how to respond when someone does react poorly to me practicing nerve. And sometimes it's even as simple as living enough life and having enough experience to have even the right words to say. That's part of what I try to impart to people in my day job, but also in the book of, here's what you can say when someone says X. And that's part of, why I downloaded TikTok of, if nice says this is what nerve says, is trying to give people the language so that they can feel more confident in those interactions. Sometimes people just don't have the words. Like, what do I say when someone says, I can't believe you said that, or, that wasn't very nice? What do you respond with? And having those tools in your back pocket can sometimes be the thing that gives you the confidence to practice it initially, and then you come up with your own words and your own things that you push back with.
Last week, I had a really difficult conversation with someone, and it was after that conversation, I saw one of your graphics, and I can't remember the exact thing. I think it was like, nice says, sorry, must have misunderstood. Nerve says, I fully understood, and what you did was wrong.
Right.
And that was basically what I did in this conversation. But coming out of it, I felt full and questioning myself and being self-critical. And I saw that and I'm like, no, this is exactly what was going on. Thank you for putting
Yes.
words to it.
And that's what I want to do for people, is part of the intention and hope with the book is to just give people the tools to pause and say, maybe that doesn't have to be my response. Maybe I don't have to, apologize or promise to say late at work. Maybe it's that I can say, actually, no, like, one of the things I posted was like someone saying, "Sure, I'll reprioritize and focus on the list of things you need done," as opposed to Nerve, which would say, "No, your poor planning doesn't constitute a change, a pivot, or an emergency on my part, and you need to handle that." Right? That would be Nerve, is to say, "I have this boundary, and your behaviors and poor planning don't mean that I now have to respond and sacrifice or, burden myself because of something that you did." And I want people to just, when you are in those moments of these things happening and you notice yourself feeling something, you're like, I don't know why this feels wrong or what to say, but to just listen to that part of yourself. And what I do even today in practice is I write it down. Like, that interaction, like, there's something about it that didn't sit right with me, and I just write it down, and I often come back to it. And that's, how I came up with, so many of the things that I impart in the book, is just going back and observing an interaction, like, well, what was happening there? What was the thing that I could have said differently? And so that's part of the tools that I'm giving people, is like, here's how you can, like, write it down, go back to it and rethink, like, what happened here? Let me unpack this scenario and what I could have done to practice nerve a little bit differently in that moment.
I want to pick back up on that writing practice. But before we do, John submitted a question that I selfishly really love and I'm desperate to hear your answer to, because I've been wanting to write about this topic for a while. And it's, how do you define integrity?
I love that question. Thank you, John, for the question. Integrity to me is alignment. It's when your actions, your values, and your words are on the same team and we're playing the same game, right? Even if it costs you something. And I think that's why integrity for many people is a challenge and feels elusive, because it will cost you something. And, integrity is refusing to be two different people at work, at home. You get the same Amira, And again, everything's like on a dial. You might get a mirror out of 2, sometimes a mirror out of 10, sometimes a mirror out of 20, depending on if you just upset me or got under my skin, right? But I am the same person. I am always me. I've always been me. But my values, my actions, and my words are on the same team. And to me, that is integrity, that you always know where I stand. And I think that's something that
Mm.
people who have ever had the chance to work with me or for me have valued is you always know where you stand with me. Like, that's always going to be clear. You always know what I believe about a thing. Like, I don't know anyone who questions what I believe about a specific thing, or if they do, they can just ask me because they know I'm going to tell them. That is how you live out integrity to me. I am in alignment with what I say I believe, with the values that I speak of and say that I hold, and it dictates how I move in the world. This same conversation yesterday of this junior staff person, she asked me, what is success to you? And one of the things I said to her is, I think for some people it would be money or title or fame or whatnot. And one of the most important things to me is that I leave people and places better than that found them. And, that's something that was imparted to me as a child. It's something I teach my daughter, but I really mean that. I think about the interactions I have, at work in a team meeting, the interactions I have at the grocery store or with a server at a restaurant. Like to me, success in this life and in this world is, did that person leave feeling good about our interaction? And did I leave them better? Did I, you know, put food on their table? Did I make them smile? Did I, drop some knowledge that helped them think about the world differently? To me, that is success, and it translates into what I think integrity is and alignment too.
That's so beautiful, especially in a world where, well, firstly, trust is the basis of all human relationships, and all we really have in our life is our human relationships. And so,
Yes,
yeah, it's essential for, I think, a happy and healthy life, and for
very.
success by that definition. I really appreciate that. I want to change gears now and go back to a little bit more about your writing practice and how the
Yeah.
book came to be and how it all got started for you. So if you could just tell us the story of you came up with this idea to write this as a book. What was the process of writing that first draft, finding your agent and the publisher? Be great to get a high level on that.
I've had this idea for at least 12 years. I'd always been unpacking nice and nerve in my life, but in particular, when I had my daughter, and she's 12 now, so that's why 12 years ago, the book idea. And part of that was because you don't have to have this experience to have this epiphany, but for me, the idea of being responsible for another human being in the world was so big, and thinking about, how am I helping to shape her to be a good human in this world? What is the world she's being left because of what I do or don't do or say or believe? And so 12 years ago, I really started getting serious about kind of thinking and unpacking this idea. So I've always had the idea for quite some time, and I didn't write the book fully. And, with non-fiction books or business books, you don't have to, right? If I was writing a fiction book like a Harry Potter, you have to write the whole thing before you can even pitch it. But with a business book, as long as you have the idea and the platform or the following or the intrigue, a publisher will at least have a conversation with you. And so I had at least a framework because I've done some of this in workshops and sessions. So I had an idea, I had a framework that I knew this is how I live my life to practice nerve versus nice, and what I think can be helpful to other people. Hence why it says 4 actions for real change in the book title, because I have these 4 things that I'm unpacking of how I have, you know, done this for myself in a proven, if you will, way. I'm evidence that practicing nerve can work in some way, shape, or form. And so I had the idea, and last year I was taking a little bit of leave from work for a host of reasons. And so I had 2 months, and my husband was like, you should just work on that book proposal you've been talking about for 12 years. Like, use this you're not at work. I was a little bit sick, but he's like, you've got some time in between doctors and things. Like, write the book proposal. Like just do it. Get a draft going. And so I did. We have this plum tree out front. We thought it was a cherry tree. That's a story for a different day. There's a plum tree, a cherry plum tree out front, and I go out there and I sit outside, and that's usually where I write or read and get my vitamin D because I'm very deficient. So I need the sun every day. And so I went out there under the plum tree, not cherry tree, and I wrote the book proposal. And I work in communications and public relations, and so I'm always pitching ideas. And for some reason, I was just like, I don't need an agent, just going to pitch my own book and get my own book deal. And that is exactly what I did. So I wrote the proposal, and my proposal was a little different than the typical. A lot of book proposals, it's a Word document, and there's like, 5 key sections, how you're going to market it, what the idea is and the framework, how often and where you speak, blah, 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 your bio. Because I live in the world of pitching things, I did a very aesthetically pleasing deck. So I made it in PowerPoint. It was really visual and really pretty. And that's part of what I learned later got me the callbacks from publishers. And I cold pitched myself. So I just, most publishers, they'll have, an email address or a formal process online, or you can find like a book acquisition editor on LinkedIn or Twitter. And I did a lot of that too. And I cold pitched myself to publishers that I had researched that did similar or published similar books and authors in terms of areas of expertise and ideas. And I heard back from 4 of them. And one of them I heard back same day, which is actually the publisher I ended up going with, Barrett Kohler. So I pitched myself because I thought, no one knows the idea better than I, and I work in business. I can like negotiate a contract or whatever. Like it's gonna be fine. And I just had the audacious nerve to self-pitch myself without an agent, without any know-how or knowledge of this industry. And it happened to work out for me. You don't have to be like me. There are tools and resources to help through this process, but I think the universe really saw me, and this is a book the world needs, and so it worked out, and here we are. And yeah.
That's incredible. It's so, the thing that I love so much about any of these bureaucratic or step-by-step processes that are published everywhere is the more you talk to people who have actually done the thing, whether it's publishing a book or getting a deal with a label as a musician, you've realized that actually the step-by-step process that people argue is the norm is actually not very typical. Like most
Right.
people seem to go around the edges or get in another way.
Yeah, it's like a jungle gym. It's not a straight ladder. It's like you're all over the place, and everyone's experience is so very different. It just depends. And, I think I, like many others, I had listened to a lot of webinars and classes on how to do it. And like I said, I just had the nerve and the audaciousness to be like, no, I can do this. I got this. Like, this is a great idea. People need this. Like, it's going to work out. And it happened to work out for me.
Did your publisher comment on the fact that you were actually living the message that you were putting in your book?
Yes, part of what a publisher signs on for is you. Right? I think a lot of people think if I get the book deal, I can sell the workshop, I can sell the idea. It's actually the opposite.
Mm.
My publisher, Miracle, actually just did a webinar today that I also attended, saying that is you have to already have the idea and the platform and the following built in for a book to sell well. And so, I was already doing this work. I was already talking about this so much out there in the world that I knew that there would be people, there was an audience. People were going to buy this book because I had enough conversations where people were like, that's the thing that I need. I need to know how to do this, how to do that. And so that was, really helpful. Is the publisher partially like they bought me, they bought Amira, right? Not just anyone could write a book about the price of nice. There are many, but it was like they chose me, Amira, the person, the figure, the voice. That's a huge part of it.
Lolita asked, what are the things that a debut author should never compromise on in a publishing deal? Like, what are the things that you, as you were talking to these 4 publishers that got back to you, were like, I'm not compromising on these things?
for sure your voice, your message, and your boundaries. And honestly, that is why I chose the publisher I chose. Spoke to several, four of them got back to me. And one of the reasons I chose Barrett Kohler is because I knew that they would protect my voice and I knew that they would not water down my message. They publish a lot of books in the space of justice and equity and leadership, and a lot of voices that you may not have heard of because other publishers wouldn't pick them up. And to me, that was really important. I wanted a team that understood what I was trying to do and put out into the world, and wouldn't try to, you know, dumb it down. And I knew they wouldn't, just based on that first phone call. Like I said, Jivan, who is my managing editor, he called me back the same day and left me a voicemail. And I was dumbfounded. I was like, did that really just happen? Is this a scam? Did I just get a call back the same day? This is wild. This can't be happening. I knew just from our initial conversation on how he showed up, how he spoke, that this is a person who is values aligned, who has integrity. And I could tell that, this is a company that has that too. And I had a couple of friends who had done books with Barrett Kohler, so I already had good feeling and a good sense. But that's part of why I chose them, because as an author, I knew I would not have to compromise the message, my voice, or my boundaries, and that they would be just as committed to protecting that, as I would be. And that's the kind of team that I needed.
I have a feeling the answer to this is no, based on what you've just shared. But Ricky asked, were there any points in the process where you felt like you had to defend your voice in the editing or not? No.
Not with this particular publisher, no. Not at all. I don't feel I had to, defend my authenticity or my voice. If anything, the collaboration and the process of, being asked questions on the part of the team I got to work with only helped make the book stronger. And if anything, it opened up my eyes to, oh, this might be a consideration that people are going to need, or a question others are going to have times 20, times 100, times 1,000. And so I need to, pivot and include that here in the book too. So I think the collaboration of the questions actually helped, but never once did I feel that anyone was trying to dumb down my message. If anything, they were encouraging me, like, go harder. Yeah.
That's awesome. That's so good to hear. So once you got your book deal and you got started on writing, can you just share what were some of the highs and lows of that process, the challenges, the easeful parts? I know we've spoken about this before and you shared that it was surprisingly easeful, but I'm curious to just share with everyone here what was that journey like for you?
You know, it is quite a thing writing a book. Being a producer of knowledge at this point, right? Which is a very different process than consuming knowledge. I felt so a low would be self-doubt.
Hmm.
Even today, the book's written, it's done, it's going to the printer literally this month, and still there are those moments of self-doubt. In terms of highs, the moment that I realized, my daughter would read this someday, that was a great high, a huge high. She actually was, she and my husband were some of my first readers for some of the chapters. Actually, like, would send her things and be like, does this make sense? Because, right, you have to write for a broad audience, and they always say, like, write to a 4th to 6th grade level, and my daughter's 12, so she happens to be in 6th grade. So I was like, read this. Do you understand it? So she was a great, audience and first reader. And, just that was a high of knowing that a book lives beyond you. The idea lives beyond you, and it can take on a life of its own. And I think a lot of that in many ways gave me the courage to tell the truth, knowing that, it may not always land in my lifetime, but who knows? There are books that I read from people that are no longer with us that are so impactful and I think are received differently, and show up on bookshelves all of a sudden where people are like, oh, we should have listened to that person. Like, I hope this is one of those things. It's a telling of truth that transcends me and my lifetime, for sure. I think that is one of the hopes that I have for the book. But yeah, those were some of the highs and the lows. The self-doubt is real. And I think that's healthy in some ways. You got to have your tools to get out of it, get out of the slump, and the questioning of self. But I also think it made me a better writer, and I think it made me a better caretaker of the message, is to stop and to question, like, is this really what needs to be said? Who else do I need to gain insight from to make sure this is said well and for many others? So it made me take great care with the message of nerve and why it's important.
Are you familiar with Elizabeth Gilbert's perspective on ideas and creativity?
Yes, I
Yeah.
follow everything Elizabeth Gilbert. I love a meme when I see pop up with something that she has said.
Yeah, it really makes me think of her kind of esoteric ideas around creativity and especially her book ideas being external things that are gifted to her and therefore she has to take care of them and do justice by
Mm,
them. And if she can't, then she will pass them back into the ether and say, this isn't for me, this is for someone else. And has amazing stories about kind of synchronicities of book ideas that other people have
David.
ended up writing. But I really love how you've reflected on this idea being something that you needed to tend to and take care of and give it the respect it deserves. And it's almost it makes the process feel a little more humbling and less, I think when you're writing a book, the alternative to that is it can feel quite egocentric of this is my idea and my brilliance. And that's probably where the work kind of falters. So I really appreciate that reframe. And the way to positively look at self-doubt.
Yeah, there's what's the word? There is use in it, right? You just have to find the way to use it well and the silver lining in it. So.
Yeah. To wrap up, given your expertise in comms and your process of becoming a published author, it's, as you'll have learned, it's so important to build your author platform or your audience in order to land that book deal. What advice would you give to people for doing it? Because obviously I've seen how you have done it so exceptionally well and with such integrity. No surprise there. But what advice would you give to people who are starting on their journey of writing and they need to build that platform?
Don't let rejection or the naysayers stop you. Every no gets you so much closer to a hell yes. And be brave in your ask. Practice nerve in your ask. And I did that even before I ended up pitching myself to publishers, is I went to friends who had written books, or my friends at my writers retreat I go to every year who knew publishers and agents, and I had the nerve to ask, like, an introduction or an informational interview to learn about your process. Build community with people and don't do it alone. I certainly didn't get to the place of having a book deal alone. It wasn't all me. It was the people around me who had built community and relationships with, who were generous with their time, with their advice, with their struggles, with their Rolodex, right? And with their contacts. And that was a huge help to me. And I think everything in this life is done in community when done well. And to me, that's something people need to think about. And so I was telling you earlier, one of my favorite things I didn't get to do this year because it's been a wild year, but every July I go to the Sonoma County Writers Camp, and it's a writing retreat. And we are for a week out in the middle of Sonoma County, and we're writing together. And that community of people and writers has been such a gift to me, and was so important to this process alone of getting to this stage of, having a book baby that's now being birthed into the world. I could not have done it without other people.
What are your hopes for the impact of this book? You talk a little bit about this in terms of it living past you and having that impact on your daughter reading. Is there anything else in the maybe more short term?
Hmm. That someone who has been taught to shrink themselves will read it and go, I'm not crazy, I'm not broken, the system is. And that then they'll feel bold enough to move through the world differently.
I love that so much. Thank you so much, Mira. I've loved this conversation.
Course.
I'm
Thank
sure
you. I can't,
everyone
that
has
went by
too.
way too fast.
Too fast. I have a couple of questions I can see in the chat, and then I'll open it up and you're welcome to go off mute. But Krishna asked, does Amira recommend any writing retreats? I know you do, but if you could share the name of them.
True. The Sonoma County Writers Retreat. If you're not in California, I don't know where everyone is, but there's some great ones. Like there's Hedgebrook in Washington State. There's the Kauai Writers Retreat if you're near or want to go to Hawaii. But one of the ways that I found even the Sonoma County Writers Retreat was on Instagram. I just figuring out Book Talk because I'm new to that, but there are recommendations that people are sharing, on the socials all the time, and that's how I found this one that I love in this community of people. But Hedgebrook is a really great one if you can travel. Sonoma County Writers Retreat. See you there next year. It was so popular they opened up an October one, so they now do it in July and October. I'll probably still always do the July one in the summer, but that's a great one. The Kauai Writers Retreat, and if you go to, in particular, the Kauai Writers Retreat website, they have a list of some others that are great there too. And there are also so many groups tied to each of those writers retreats who will still write together, like on Zoom or Teams. Mine does. They do like 8 to 12. Not everybody has a jobby job, but I have a day job, so I can't do that. But when I can pop in every once in a while, I love to. But they just have an open Zoom from 8 a.m. to 12 p.m. where they write together, and you can talk or you can do it quietly. And I think having those kind of communities is really, really helpful as well.
I'm also going to plug that next summer, I really want to host a writers' retreat in Mendocino. I live in Mendocino,
Yep.
which is just further up the coast. So if you want to stay in touch with authorship, then sign up to one of our classes. I added a link in the chat. And I'm going to read out John's question. How would you word a commitment worthy of being placed on a mirror to help a person operationalize the choice between nice and enough? I love this, and I'm going to put it on my mirror.
Ooh. Okay, John. I know John. John is also at Hair Color. Hi, friend. Ooh, I love that. Okay, I'm reading it too. I just opened the chat. How would you word a commitment worthy of being on a mirror to help a person operationalize the choice between nice and nerve? Oh,
I feel like it's a
one,
phone case one too, just a consistent
nice.
reminder.
One of the things I always ask myself when I'm trying to decide is who does this serve? I consistently ask, who does this serve? And the other question I ask myself every waking moment of the day is, am I being my most uninterrupted self in this moment? Those are two things that I always have in mind. But yeah, who does this serve? Because so much of why, when you read the book, you'll see why we practice nice is because those who hold the power right now want things to stay the same. They like the status quo. They don't want things to change. And so I ask myself, who does this serve? Because again, this whole country, so many of our institutions were not built with people like me in mind, with women, Black people, Hispanic people, the LGBTQ plus community. They were not built with our well-being in mind. So I ask all the time, like, who does being nice serve in this moment? And the answer is almost always not something good. And so I'm like, that's it. We're going with nerve. That's it. We're going with nerve. It might be a 2 on the dial again. Might be a 2. Some days it's a 10. But I always ask that. Who does this serve? And it's almost never a great answer.
So good. I'm honestly going to write that on my phone today or put it as my background. I wanted to ask, what does it mean to you to be your most uninterrupted self? I just wanted to dig into what that meant.
Yeah, it really is, being able to show up as my chosen self, right? Still, that is still the goal and the aim in every space that I enter, being able to say what I need to say in the way that I need to say it without like the tone policing. Some people don't like how you said it, even if it is true. And to me, just being able to show up as fully Amira and, living in a way that people go, oh, huh, maybe I could do that too. Because I think when each of us shows up uninterrupted with all of our values, all of our mess, all of our greatness and our shine and everything in between, that it gives other people the permission to do the same. So I try to live my life in that way. It's not always safe to, but I think also have some levels of privilege that allow me to live uninterrupted. And I try to do that because I think it's important for other people to see it, to know, like, okay, that it can be done. It can be done. And I have permission to do it too, because Amira did it. And if you need to say that to save yourself, say it. It was Amira's fault. She told me to.
What would Amira do?
What would Amira do?
So good. All right. Do we have any other questions from anyone else before we close out? If not, I'm going to read through because I think we had a couple of others from submissions.
Nice.
And you're welcome to go off mute. This is a question that came in the submissions, and you might not have an answer to it, or maybe it sounds like we have a couple of people from Barrett Cola here, so maybe they have more answers to this. But it was what's selling in nonfiction right now, and did that influence your positioning? And maybe it influenced, you said you had to kind of pick a category. Maybe that's what it influenced.
What's selling in nonfiction right now? I think that there is a very real hunger for books that are bold but usable. I think there is a need for like the how to. People want to know, it's nice for me to show up and say like you should practice more nerve. They're like, but what does that mean? How do I do that? And so people want things that are usable, not just, philosophical ideas or a concept. They want an actual step by step of do this, then this, and this will be the outcome or the potential outcome. And I do think that is what's selling right now. I also think because of the moment we find ourselves in socially, politically, culturally, people are really interested in rhetoric and communication and debate. It's actually why I was telling you this earlier, why I have 19,000 friends now on TikTok. I did not have those many friends until July 2nd. That was like 2 weeks ago. Because I randomly I watched a debate, Jubilee. If you follow Jubilee on YouTube or anywhere, they do these setups in these rooms where they have someone who's like famous or credible with like 20 XYZ. So there's like one where it's like this person is a person of faith with 20 atheists, and they'll have like a debate or a conversation. And there was one with Candace Owens, some people may know, and 20 young progressives. And as she was having the conversation, I noticed that she was using a lot of media training tactics, which are not the same as debate. If you've ever been a part of a high school debate team, like there are very specific tactics and tools that you're trained with. And I noticed her using a lot of things I would use in media if I was in front of a reporter on live television. And those things are helpful tricks when you're trying to like curate a message and how people perceive you, but it's not helpful for debate. And so I just broke down like 3 things that I saw her do and my perspective as someone who trains people in media and works in comms, and it blew up and people loved it. So people are looking for stuff like that. A lot of people are like, I've never heard of media training. How do I get that? I want to have better conversations about the things I believe. Like, that's so cool. Tell me and teach me more. And so those kind of how-tos, I think so many people are hungry for in a world where we are overloaded with information, but people want usable information that will help change their world.
Yeah. I also looked this question up before or yesterday and found that in addition to those two, the social justice and the how to, the bold how to, and the verifiable memoir, the number one was true
Ooh,
crime. So,
wow. Verifiable memoir. I like that.
yeah, useful information that will help change the world. Yeah, I love that. All right. Well, we are at time. Amira, thank you so
Of
much. I
course.
hope that this is the second conversation of many, and
Yes.
you've definitely inspired me. You have left me, I can fully say, better than you found me today. So you've followed through on your goal of success. I'm so, so grateful. Thank you, everyone, for being here. We're going to get a recording and share it out. And I might also ask Amira if she can answer a couple of the questions that we didn't get to from the Luma submissions. But thanks everyone and have a
Thanks for
lovely
having
rest
me,
of
and
the
thank you
day.
all for showing up. Appreciate you all.